Tallahassee. Tallahassee fights not just to survive, but to forget in a world consumed by death and decay. To the few who meet him, he's the trigger-happy cowboy with a taste for Twinkies and an endless hunger for zombie carnage. But beneath that swagger and sarcasm lies a man shattered by a loss too heavy to carry. His love for firearms and sugary snacks masks the deep cracks left by the death of his son, Buck, the only thing that once gave him purpose in a world that made no sense even before the undead arrived. What makes Tallahassee tragic isn't just who he lost, but how he copes. He hides behind humor and violence, desperate to turn grief into momentum. His affection for Little Rock, a girl who reminds him of Buck, is his last link to emotional grounding. Yet even in that surrogate fatherhood, he's haunted. He isn't trying to save the world, he's just trying to outrun a memory he can't face. Throughout Zombieland and its sequel, Tallahassee is the muscle, the madman, and the maniac. But behind each bullet he fires is a broken prayer that he never says out loud. And when all seems lost, when monsters close in and hope thins out, he doesn't hesitate to risk his life for others. Not because he believes in heroism, but because a part of him died long ago and the rest is just waiting to catch up. Oedipus. Oedipus is the man who solved the riddle of the Sphinx, but never managed to answer the riddle of his own life. Born to Laius and Jocasta, king and queen of Thebes, Oedipus entered the world under a death sentence, a prophecy that he would one day kill his father and marry his mother. In fear, his parents ordered his death, but a chain of pity handed him to strangers who raised him as their own. Unaware of his true lineage, he fled his adoptive home to escape that same prophecy, only to walk right into it. At a crossroads, he murdered a man in a fit of rage. In Thebes, he saved the city from a monster and married its queen. Only later did he learn the man was his father and the queen was his mother. The truth shattered him. Jocasta took her life. Oedipus blinded himself with her brooch and vanished into exile. Years later, in Oedipus at Colonus, we meet him again, broken but wiser. The world no longer feared his rage but honored his suffering. He rejected his sons for betrayal and offered his death as a gift of peace to the land that welcomed him. In the end, he was more than a man of fate. He was a king who faced horror without flinching, a father who cursed betrayal, and a myth who turned tragedy into transcendence. Oedipus didn't just fulfill a prophecy, he endured it, and in doing so became timeless. Anakin Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker was never meant to be ordinary. Born of no father, molded by prophecy, and whispered to be the chosen one, his life wasn't so much lived as it was scripted by forces far beyond him. And yet, for all the power he commanded, his tragedy lies in how little control he ever truly had. He started as a wide-eyed slave boy on Tatooine, dreaming of freedom and stars, racing pods like the desert had already made him a survivor. But destiny came knocking in Jedi robes, and soon Anakin was plucked from obscurity and dropped into a galaxy-sized burden. Bring balance to the Force. No pressure, right? As he grew, so did the cracks. The Jedi wanted him stoic, but Anakin was all fire and fear, love, attachment, desperation. They weren't bugs in his system, they were his system. He married Padme in secret, mourned his mother in anguish, and feared loss like it was the only certainty in life. And in that fear, the Sith found their opening. By the time he became Darth Vader, Anakin had convinced himself it was for peace. That power could protect what love never could, but all it did was leave him burned, masked, and hollowed out, trapped in a suit of regrets. He didn't die when Obi-Wan left him burning. He died when he choked Padme, when he turned his back on who he was. But still, there was something left. A sliver of light, and in the end, that's what saved him. The galaxy may remember Vader, but we remember Anakin because pain doesn't erase hope, it only buries it. Still believe in the light? Subscribe, or follow the dark. Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy is what happens when a man forgets who he is and then has to live with what he's done to remember it. He was never truly Stark and never fully Greyjoy. Taken as a political hostage after his father's failed rebellion, Theon grew up in Winterfell under Ned Stark's roof, not as a son, but as a reminder that rebellion had consequences, that the North remembers, and that Theon, despite the warm fires and noble lessons, was still an outsider. So when Robb Stark named him a brother, Theon believed it, and when the chance came to prove himself to his blood family, he took it by betraying the Starks and capturing Winterfell, the only home he ever truly knew. That choice, it cost him everything. His honor, his body, his name. Captured by Ramsay Bolton, Theon didn't just suffer, he was shattered. Piece by piece, finger by finger, identity by identity, he was carved down into something less than human. Reek. a broken pet who flinched at shadows and lived in the echo of screams. But even in that darkness, some ember of Theon remained. He would eventually fight to save Sansa, he would stand for Yara, he would reclaim pieces of his name, not through glory or vengeance, but through small, brutal acts of redemption. He didn't need to be a hero, he just needed to stop running. And in the end, he died facing death head on, protecting Bran Stark, the boy he once betrayed, like it could somehow make up for everything he'd done. Maybe it didn't, but maybe it was enough. John Locke. John Locke is the kind of heartbreak reserved for people who spend their entire lives trying to prove they were special, only to die realizing they weren't. He isn't just a character in Lost. He's the island's biggest mystery, its most faithful disciple, and ultimately, its most tragic fool. Before the crash of Oceanic Flight 815, Locke was just another man in a cubicle, a lonely soul paralyzed from the waist down, rejected by his birth parents, laughed at for believing in fate, and quietly screaming into the void, "Don't tell me what I can't do." And oh, did the world love telling him. Then he crash landed on the island and could walk again. Just like that. Boom. Miracle. And for the first time in forever, John Locke believed he had a purpose, a destiny. He wasn't just some guy stuck in a chair anymore. He was a hunter, a protector, a believer. Followed signs no one else could see. Talked to smoke, stared at hatch doors like they held the secrets of the universe. Spoiler, they didn't. His blind faith turned him into a pawn, used and discarded by the very forces he thought he served. And in the end, it wasn't the island that betrayed him, it was people. He died alone in a hotel room, convinced he'd failed, unaware that his death would reignite the spark of belief in others. So was he pathetic, or was he a prophet? Honestly, both. And that's exactly what makes him unforgettable. Ice King. Simon Petrikov didn't fall from grace like a villain. He dissolved memory by memory until only a shadow remained. Once a brilliant archaeologist with a passion for ancient relics and a heart full of love for his fiancée Betty, Simon's descent began the moment he placed a magical crown on his head just for a laugh. That laugh never came back. The crown gave him power over ice and snow, but chipped away at his mind, turning a kind scholar into the erratic Ice King, a lonely monarch of frost obsessed with kidnapping princesses. An echo of a love he could no longer remember. He fought it, harder than anyone knew. Left behind were tear-stained tapes, quiet apologies, recorded in case he lost himself completely. He shielded young Marceline through the apocalypse, clinging to their bond even as his memory slipped through his fingers. The crown didn't just distort his thoughts, it replaced them, burying the man beneath layers of madness. Betty became a blur, then a fairy tale, and in the silence of his icy kingdom, he told stories about Fiona and Cake, fabrications to fill the growing emptiness. Even when the madness faded and Simon returned, there was no reset button. Betty was gone. The world didn't pause for him. His place in it now unclear. He wandered, surviving as a relic of another time, not cursed, not evil. Just a man who lived too long, lost too much, and remembers everything, except the parts he misses most. Lucifer. Lucifer once stood in the highest choir of angels, a radiant force molded in beauty, intellect, and divine favor, until the moment he decided heaven wasn't big enough for two rulers. In Paradise Lost, he isn't just the villain with a pitchfork. He's a fallen visionary who believes submission was a greater sin than rebellion. When God appointed his son to the divine throne, Lucifer didn't kneel. He rallied a third of heaven's host and ignited a war in paradise, not with rage, but with cold conviction. And when the heavens split and he was cast into Tartarus, he didn't beg for forgiveness. He stood up in flame and thunder and said, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." But here's the tragedy, he never really reigned. Even in hell, Lucifer couldn't escape the shadow of the kingdom he lost. He built palaces from ash, gave speeches that echoed through fire, and plotted revenge against a god who never blinked. His temptation of Eve wasn't just malice, it was desperate validation, proof that he could reshape creation in his own image. Instead, he was turned into a snake, silenced and humiliated. And yet his pain isn't rooted in damnation, it's in memory. Every sunrise reminds him of what he once was. Every act of defiance is a prayer twisted into a curse. Lucifer isn't scary because he's evil, he's scary because he's broken, and he chose to stay that way. Guts. Guts has never known peace, only war, betrayal, and the crushing weight of survival. Born from the corpse of a hanged woman and raised among mercenaries who treated him more like a weapon than a child, his life was a cruel prelude to the pain that would follow. He was forged in blood, swinging a sword too big for his frame before he could even pronounce the word mercy. And just when it seemed like the world might give him a reason to hope, a friend, a lover, a purpose, everything shattered. The Band of the Hawk, the closest thing he ever had to a family, was obliterated in the eclipse. An event so horrific it feels like the universe itself blinked in cruelty. And yet, Guts didn't die. He clawed his way out of hell, literally branded and broken. His lover Casca traumatized beyond recognition. His own body a map of scars. But he kept going, not because he believed in destiny, not because he thought vengeance would fix anything, but because pain was all he had ever known, and motion was the only thing that dulled it. His tragedy isn't just in what he lost, it's in what he still carries. Rage that burns hotter than any flame, guilt that time refuses to soften, and a sense of humanity he never truly lost, even after everything tried to rip it from him. Guts isn't just a tragic figure, he's a storm that learned to keep walking. Not every story we watch ends on a happy note. Some characters find their way, while others get lost and change forever. Today, we explained fiction's most tragic characters. Let us know in the comments which story hit you the hardest. And if there are any heartbreaking tales we missed, feel free to share them too. We're trying to build a meaningful legacy together, with your suggestions guiding the way. See you next time.